Oh, good morning and welcome to thoughts and updates for this week in December that's a bit blowy and blustery. After yesterday having been told by Scottish Government, Welsh Government, Northern Irish Government and also the British Government that Christmas is no longer what we thought it was going to be, and further restrictions have left us feeling a little less than festive, although to be honest, I was already there. We will have our socially distanced three households in the house for that 24-hour period and adhere to the rules. Many people up till this point felt that the rules were difficult to fathom and understand. And of course, the scientific advice is that if we had a 5-day window where we allowed people to mix and mingle to the extent that was suggested there was a possibility, that this new wave, the third wave, which is a new strain of COVID-19, was going to take hold in a way that the previous strain had been an amateur at. So the risk to life was clearly extensive, and we are now in a position where instead of having 5 days to celebrate and tour the country, we're not touring the country, we've only got one day to get it sorted, and then a 3-week lockdown, which is close and similar to the lockdown that happened in March, but it's not exactly the same. We will see schools and restricted timetables not quite closing but going online for at least a period of a week and then being reviewed during that time. It's a stress for teachers because they go from face-to-face learning, which is done very differently, to online learning. It's something that I have been involved and engaged with because of my tutoring. So I've gone from face-to-face in somebody's house to being a face on the equivalent of a Zoom call. And it does bring its own stresses and strains, and I have great sympathy for teachers who are now having to alter their method of delivery because of the pronouncement that was made yesterday with just 3 or 4 days to go before Christmas Day. This should be the wind down week. It's now become very much, in teachers' eyes, the wind up week, because as they go into Christmas and New Year, rest assured that they're going to be spending some of that time not with their family, but ensuring that there are resources there for people. And I'm talking about the good teachers. Of course, there are people in every profession who are not going to be doing the work that needs to be done, doing whatever it takes in order to support children and young people. And the company I work for, in my own role, we are continuing to support children and young people on length and breadth of Scotland. And I take my hat off at this time to all of our care workers who on Christmas Day or on New Year's Day are not going to be with their family, but going to be with somebody else's family. And because of the new restrictions, we are talking about children and young people with just a few days to go before a time where they were probably going to meet up with their families, see their parents and see their loved ones for the first time in a tremendous amount of time. That has been ripped from them, ripped asunder. We have many kids who are now going to be isolated in Scotland. They're from England and unable to travel to see those who they love very dearly. And care workers are going to have to deal with that upset and that trauma without being given the type of reward that a clap on a Thursday night doesn't bring, and that is financially. The £500 being given out, which will come out sometime next year, hopefully by the end of the financial year, to care workers and NHS workers, is more than welcome and well deserved. But what about a substantial pay rise? What about turning the clap into some kind of significant uplift in salary, which allows people to come into that profession not just because they care, but because they have the skills to care better, and upskill them in a way in which is meaningful to the children, young people and the elderly and the sick and the infirm, the very people for whom this society should be judged, about whom we should be held accountable, because it is not the entrepreneurs, the rich, who have got the ability to build a better future who should be rewarded by society, but the people who do not have the skills, the ability, or indeed the physical attributes to build that type of life for themselves, who should be supported. So, along with that, another bailout this week came from the Scottish Government announcing that through the Scottish Football Association, some clubs are going to get some money. What I've learned this week is that it may be too late for one club in particular, Greenock Morton. Now, I have a great affinity with Morton, and I wrote about that in my SSFSA stuff last week, which has just come out. The Tail of the Bank is somewhere that I have a little bit of a heart flutter about, because I was the TikTok correspondent there for a while. The fact that there's a possibility that such a massive community club may not survive, and particularly something the size of Morton, when we have the Ray family who have been behind that club for so long, but the chairman, Crawford Ray, seems to be thinking that a hermit-like existence is the way to push forward, when what fans need is somebody to come out and show some form of leadership, in a sense a bit like Anne Budge has at Hearts, who has told Robbie Nielsen, don't worry, whatever we're going through at the moment, your budget for playing is not going to diminish. Now, I wrote last week, and it's published this week, about how the former manager David Hopkin had provided something for Morton fans to think about, because he fell on his sword. He decided to leave Morton so that his wage could be saved. What I discovered this week in the Greenock Telegraph was that not only has he done such a selfless act, that he was paying people's wages, bonuses, and indeed for food for people, according to the assistant manager who has taken over, Mr. McElhone. Now, that may be true, it may not be true, but it is a stinking indictment upon what is happening within the national game, that people who are employed within it are having to dip into their own pocket. Of course, in care and in education, that's something that's been there for decades. I remember going and buying pens and jotters and textbooks and God knows what else in order to support my time in schools. So it's not new that we as a society are depending upon the largesse of the people who have the least amount of money, because remember that care workers aren't paid a premium, and although teachers are paid well, the amount of effort that they are putting in on a daily, weekly, monthly and annual basis outweighs the reward that they get, because they're all caring professions. And sometimes I do not think that teachers get the reward they deserve. Sometimes I think they get too much. Sometimes I find myself in conflict with teachers. I certainly do find myself in conflict with teachers when it comes to my day-to-day work, when I see how they treat or they are dealing with children and young people who are in trauma on a regular basis. But then I am blown away by some schools, by some teachers who are not only willing to go the extra mile, but are willing to put any kind of effort in to maintain a relationship with children and young people who have rejected them constantly and consistently. And we need to find those gems and celebrate them all the time, but we don't celebrate them by simply punting them £500, clapping on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock, and then forgetting all about them when it comes to handing out real reward. So this week for writing, I've been doing a bit here and there. It has been back to Puerto Rico for me for Ringside Report. Also, Mr. Trumpney's executive orders to murder people. It's the death penalty. I'm against the death penalty. I make no apology for that. I've been a member of Amnesty International for about 6 years now, and they are principally against the death penalty wherever. There were no federal executions since 2003. 17 years later, Donald Trump has signed 13 executive orders, which makes him the most lethal president in many ways in living history. Also, for Scottish Football Supporters Association, I've been writing something about good old Jim Goodwin, who St Mirren beat Rangers, about how he seems to be unable to remember why he was sent to the stand, and Mr Goodwin maybe doesn't remember a whole load of other things. For Talking Boys, it was my last few columns yesterday, and of course overnight Sal Canelo Alvarez dominated Callum Smith. I really thought Callum Smith had a chance. I really believed he had an opportunity. I had him winning by split decision on points. I thought it was a big ask, but I thought that he would go there and really take the fight to Alvarez, but it didn't happen. Alvarez is now 4-weight world champion, pound for pound best in the world. Absolutely. Gennady Golovkin the night before absolutely destroyed his opponent. A 7th round stoppage for Golovkin. Alvarez, the beating of a man that many thought would actually push him relatively simplistically. Is there a trilogy fight? I think there might well be. Nothing for Fringe Review this week, although I've been keeping an eye on what's going on, and there's certainly a lot of stuff coming out which is Panto based or Christmas based. And that leaves us with the end of this week. It's not the last Sunday in 2020, and I will be back next week. But until then, it's bye for now.